Everything Sequel is brought to you by Slater's 50/50. It's burgers, Jim, but not as we know it. Jim! Jim!
The Everything Sequel podcast contains explicit language. 'Cause we learned it from you, Dad. Hello and welcome to the Everything Sequel podcast. My name is Michael Shantz of the How Dare You Awards. With me is Tom Stewart from Lonesome Whistle Productions. Tom, we're talking about Back to the Future 3 today. You excited?
Why do we cut things so close?
So, let's talk about Back to the Future 3. This is 1990. Again, Robert Zemeckis. This movie was made or shot along with consecutively. In fact, they shot one portion for this movie that they were shooting during Back to the Future 2 with Jennifer on the porch.
Evidently.
Yeah, but everything else they shot, they shot them back to back. This was one of my first memories of a movie doing that. In my research, though, Richard Lester rears his ugly head again. Apparently, he did this with Three Musketeer movies in the 70s.
Interesting. And and Superman, too. The first two Superman movies.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. So, there's definitely precedent for doing it. It definitely works the movie's advantage.
For sure.
To watch them both together because they put references to...
They feel really connected.
To either film in there, and so you do feel like they're actually connected organically.
Let me ask you this, though, because the one thing we didn't talk about for Back to the Future 2 was all the things that were going to come up in Back to the Future 3, they often felt just sort of rammed in there, to make sure that the audience... I mean, it just feels a little inelegant, I guess.
That's probably true. I'm just grateful that they got it right. You don't want to oversell. I guess they learned that lesson at the end of the first movie. It's like you don't want to oversell what you're gonna potentially do next if you don't know where it's gonna be. You don't really know where it's going. I mean, that's the Halloween movies in a nutshell.
There you go.
You can overpromise. So I just see it as a kind of like it is very much kind of taking care of business. But I think there's one storyline that is unusually, you can't understand it without seeing both movies, which is the Needles subplot.
Yeah.
And when they're talking about Needles, you're like, who the fuck is Needles? There was no Needles in the first movie. And this really is. It's like you have to wait to the end of the third movie to get the payoff on that.
To get the whole Needles subplot.
Yeah, and it doesn't help that it's Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and you're like, well, that's just very confusing. They're calling Flea Needles, and I don't even know who this guy is supposed to be in the storyline. So there's a couple of subtle things where they're sort of like playing the long game, the slow burn. But yeah, a lot of the other time you're like, Old West? Why are we talking about the Old West? It's crazy though. Like these films were so close together that they actually have
6 months apart. Yeah,
a preview of this movie at the end of the second movie.
Correct.
That has major spoilers in it. I guess people didn't care back then, but there are like you see the end of the third movie at the end of the second movie. Yeah, which has got to be a mistake.
Well, it was a choice. What can I say?
They wanted that shot of Marty and Jennifer on the porch at the expense of all audience anticipation.
Correct.
Which is a bad...
At the expense of all common sense.
Yeah. So, it's you kind of know where this movie's going before before it's even started.
Well, like the second movie, this movie had a $40 million budget. Not quite as well, $88 million in the USA, 249 in the world, so it's still making a ton of money. But I feel like this movie is considered, sort of the redheaded stepchild of these three movies. And I would like to state completely and totally, I love this movie. I said that this was, in my rankings, I said this is the, number one. Number 3 is number 1, and number 2 is number 2. You inexplicably say that the second movie is a bad movie, and yet this is a good movie, and rank the second above the third.
That's correct.
Ugh,
well,
God.
no, yeah, I know. But you see, I felt the same way you did for a long time. I felt that this movie got a lot of unfair flack, and I don't even know what the criticisms are of the movie, but I'm sure they're not the same ones that I have. I think watching it most recently, I really started to notice how off the pace of this movie is. And I think that's a big problem. I think the action scenes go on too long. I think the romantic subplot is a big misstep. And I
love it. I think it's so charming. I love Mary Steenburgen.
And I think there's an indulgence about it that you don't get certainly in the second movie, and not really in the first. We lose a lot of that pace that drives the second movie, which is actually one of the great things about it.
Yeah, but I think they're making a different movie. And they're not making a parody of a Western. They're making...
Oh, they are. Why would you have Lyle from Blazing Saddles in a movie if you're not making a Western parody?
I think they're just trying to make an honest Western, fish out of water, completely out of water kind of a story.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, I find this movie to be so charming.
And I like the idea of shifting the focus to Doc Brown, which was a very deliberate choice. I mean, the movie is kind of filtered through his perspective more than the previous movies have been. But you lose a lot of Marty, which is a real problem. I wonder, given what happened with Michael J. Fox's career afterwards, whether they would have made the same decision, because he's on the sidelines for a lot of this movie, I feel.
I don't think you're wrong about that, but it doesn't bother me. They still continue the subplot, which, by the way, we didn't really give mention to. The thing that this movie does well that I don't think the second movie did well is this idea of Marty refusing to be called chicken.
Well, this is the needle. It's based on some. It's all in order to understand it, you have to have seen to the end of the third movie. It's like we're watching Hill Street Blues or The Sopranos or something. It's like you can't just this needle storyline is like it's buried in there,
deep.
Yeah, and
but it comes across so much better in this movie. In the second movie, it's so overwrought of like nobody calls me chicken,
which they changed to Yeller when they get into the Old West. Which I always wondered whether Big Chicken intervened and says you can't be disparaging chickens in a big budget Hollywood movie.
They might do that today. I doubt they did it in 1990.
The colonel the colonel visited the set and it's like, you gotta stop disparaging
knock this
barbecue.
Shit off. He said knock this shit off.
And it's I think that it is a genuine, if somewhat awkward attempt to have a story that goes across these movies, like a flexi narrative American.
Well,
TV
the problem
thing.
was that they didn't really have a genuine flaw for Marty in the first movie, so they had to invent one for the second and third movies.
I guess so. I mean, I don't know. Isn't he not tragic enough? He tried to sleep with his mother, or his mother tried to sleep with him. I mean, isn't he enough of a Greek hero
several times. Yeah.
I think he's got enough going on in that first movie between inventing rock and roll for the black people.
How many years ahead did he make Johnny Be Good?
Yeah, exactly. I think he's got enough of an arc without this.
He should be apologizing, is what he should be doing.
Yeah, and so I found it lagging in a way that I think this time around I was watching it, I was grateful for how frenetically paced the second movie is, and I think this movie could have done with a lot more of that for it to be a satisfying viewing experience. I just feel like right from the beginning, it just feels slower and more leaden. Like,
see, I think it's slower, but purposefully, it doesn't feel leaden to me at all. It feels pastoral because we're in the Old West, and I just accept it as that.
I mean, I have agreed with that in the past. I think probably, and I may agree with that again. But right now, watching these two movies back to back, that's the main feeling I got.
But right now, I disagree completely.
The dog that you know, Christopher Lloyd should, you know, it deserves his own movie, and you know, I just feel like it peaks too early. Like, he nails that first scene is the best thing he does in any movie.
It's so good in his whole acting career.
It's you know, it's like
he's never going to be as good as when he goes into the bathroom. Yeah, he's never going to be as good as he is when he slams that door in the bathroom and says he refuses to believe he is here. It's so fantastic. Like, I have to rewind it 5 times every time I watch that movie.
And he's leaning on he's leaning on the organ and making those sound effect noises. I think, you know, I'm told, you know, I don't have a problem with him being shifted to the center of the movie. I think it was the right move. I just think the way that they do it, I think these movies need to be like on top of the bubble in terms of pace, and this one is like always behind for me.
For now. You might change your mind next week.
Charmingly leisurely. At another
Crying
time.
out loud.
But
Jesus.
I just thought, you know, and it kind of weighed down. The action is weighed down by not being tight enough, and there's a lot of action in this movie, and but I mean, I love the fact it's a Western. I think that was a really good place to go. You know, like the older past, bringing in Hollywood Westerns. I think it's a great idea. It's just, you know, it's not half an hour more of a good idea. Especially when, you know, like the movie's showing that it's been done a few different times this way before. Blazing Saddles. Once Upon a Time in the West, you know, we've kind of seen these ideas before. So, what's the big whoop?
I still disagree that comparing it to Once Upon a Time in the West or you know, a Blazing Saddles, I find them to be. It's certainly not parody on that level as Blazing Saddles.
And I just like this. What really came through? It's really weird because I saw this in the movie theater when I was a child. And I was in an audience full of children, and I was a child. I'm
glad we got that straightened out.
Just to clear that up. And I remember, you know, when that great moment when Mad Dog Tannen's, when the manure falls out of his mouth. And I remember, like, I can still hear the kids in the audience going, ew, like that. And I was just struck by how many moments like that there are in this movies where people standing in poop, piss, you know, like it's this kind of like toilet humor thing, and this kind of, you know, almost kind of Jar Jar Binks style. It feels like, and this is another thing that a lot of late sequels do. They're trying to appeal more to the family market than perhaps the previous two movies have.
Yeah, well, certainly the second movie is far darker in tone than, and this is probably the lightest movie of the three.
Although we do have a lynching, which it doesn't go down well in today's loaded climate.
That's true. That's true.
But I just found, you know, that it was and you know, we've talked about this before. And one of the reasons I love the original Back to the Future is because, you know, it's a movie driven by incest and white supremacy. You know, these really like
there's some dark shit going on in that movie. Yeah.
And the second movie really doubles down on that, I think.
Yeah.
And this one to me sort of feels like, you know, what happened to a lot of filmmakers like Zemeckis and Spielberg, and it's like, you know, they have kids and suddenly they want to start making movies that are really inoffensive.
Yeah, I see that also with actors making choices to make movies that are more kid-centric. I can't think of a good example right now where I thought to myself, oh, that kind of pisses me off. Just go make a good movie.
Steve Martin, Harrison Ford, I mean, you know.
Yeah, it happens.
It does.
And you're not wrong about some of the humor, but I also think they also rely on some really great, you know, humor based on this sort of Old West idea. One of my favorite moments in this movie is when Marty says, "Lighten up, jerk," and Tannen looks over at his buddies, who all just kind of shrug.
Yeah.
And he looks back over, "Mighty strong words, runt." You know.
Yeah, no, it
even though he clearly didn't understand a single thing he said.
What they thought the Old West was in the 1950s versus what, you know, someone from the 80s
yeah,
thinks
that too,
it is.
right?
Clint Eastwood.
What idiot dressed you up in that outfit?
Yeah,
you
the
did.
moonwalking, well, you know, making him dance and he moonwalks. I think that's I think there's,
so.
You know, that all still works, and that's a new tried and tested formula that they've been peddling from the start. That kind of anachronism comedy. It's great. It works really well.
They actually asked permission to use Clint Eastwood's name. They asked Clint, and he gave permission and was apparently very tickled.
Yeah.
That he's in this movie. And a little known fact, when he's doing the breakdancing,
yes,
the sounds of those breakdancing are made by Michael Winslow.
Of course.
For those that
the
don't
last
know,
job he ever had.
Right. For those that don't know, you should know that Michael Winslow was the character in the Police Academy movies who made all the funny sounds. So,
and it's interesting to me, like this is 1990, right? This release date is 1990, and so what's kind of cool about this movie too is that we're in another, like, this trilogy spans 2 decades.
Right.
And it's kind of, that's just math at the moment, but I'm going somewhere with this. You know, we go from Huey Lewis and the News to ZZ Top in terms of, like, the musical guest of the movie. So we actually get to see history happen. Like, things move on and change. And it's so fascinating to me that when they go back to 1985 at the end of the movie, that is now the past.
Right, yeah.
They're now in the 90s. And there's something, and maybe it is just, like, you know, an illusion, but there is something about this movie, even though the previous film was made a year earlier, it just feels more like a 90s movie to me. I don't know if there's a new technology that came in on the cusp of the decade that makes everything look and feel different, but I would never mistake this movie for any other decade. And I wouldn't necessarily... And, you know, Back to the Future, the previous 2 movies are definitely 80s movies. It just feels...
Yeah.
And in the family-friendly tone is a big part of it. But the music and just where everyone is in the frame seems like it could only come from the early 90s. You know, it's like...
That's interesting.
It's like we start and we're... You know, the first film, Back to the Future, is like the Breakfast Club. And Back to the Future 3 is Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. You know?
No, how dare you?
No, I mean it's something different. Something.
I understand what you're saying, but I still say you should go fuck yourself. Ladies and gentlemen,
that's not an insult coming from me. I'll happily watch, you know, kids being eaten out of Cheerios.
Oh my God! All right. We're going to have a little bit more for Back to the Future 3, and then we're going to pitch our sequels right after this. Stay tuned, please. Look, people, we're living in strange times. We know that, don't we? Of course we do. People don't even know what to do with themselves. We're getting stir crazy. Well, get outside and get yourself some great food, I say. You need to go to Slater's 50/50 in Point Loma's Liberty Station. It's time to treat yourself to booze, to beer, to burgers, and more. They have their full menu, people. Their full menu, I say. How many restaurants do you know that are doing that? Most places are doing a quarter of their menu, probably. Some might be doing a half. Maybe a few have got 3/4 of a menu. But Slater's 50/50 has their full menu, including their signature 50/50 patty. It's half ground beef. It's half ground bacon. It's 100% delicious. What more could you possibly ask? Worried about social distancing? Well, it is in place, people. Tables are separated, and the staff will always be seen wearing masks. You're out of excuses. Get off your keister and come on down to Liberty Station's own Slater's 50/50. Indoor dining available. Outdoor dining available. Bring the family. Bring your dog. Come enjoy the normal again. Good day to you. I said good day. And we're back. We're here talking about Back to the Future 3. Tom and I are having civil disagreements, I would say, on the value and the self-worth of Back to the Future 3. So, Tom, you're saying that this movie is a good movie, but worse than Back to the Future 2. We've talked about the idea of sort of the kid 90s movie aspect of the movie. What do you think is the thing that is really holding this movie back? Because for me, I mean, I love everything about this movie except like the last 4 minutes.
I despise the last 4 minutes.
I agree with that completely. I think the
Okay.
last 4 minutes of this movie are probably the worst thing in the series.
I mean, you know, nobody asked for the time train.
No, yeah.
Nobody wanted it. I mean, we've already talked about Jar Jar Binks. It's like Jar Jar Binks on wheels,
Right.
basically. It's almost as unwieldy as a special effect as well.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
And you know what's
suppose
funny to me about the train ending is that clearly they wanted to just sort of call back to the great ending of the first movie.
right, and
Right.
they wanted a reunion between the two
Yeah.
lead characters.
And I
which,
think
again, I understand that you need to do that.
I don't think you do though. Like to me,
Yeah, no, you don't. You're right.
to me,
You're right, but-
what they should have done is a callback to the second movie, and I want another Western Union guy there with a note and the picture of them in front of the clock. And it's a sadder goodbye because they don't get to see each other, but based on the choices they made during this last movie, that's the ending that they should have had and deserved. And I think it would have made it a better ending. It would have been, I would have gotten choked up of Marty.
Yeah, it definitely fits the melancholy mood of this movie more.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't care about it in terms of tone. I just think that train looks fucking ugly. We go from like the perfect marriage of period design with science fiction,
Sure.
which is the DeLorean, to Thomas the Time Engine. It's not. It's just. I mean, I hate it, and one kid's called Jules, the other one's called Vern.
Yeah.
I mean, again, something that would have been
And
great as
this
like
is-
a 5-minute Verizon commercial for the Super Bowl.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it does. It looks like a commercial. That's what it looks like. And
and it's very. I mean, it's like it's absolute sap, because not only do they have this ugly train that doesn't make sense, they change the whole concept of time travel with like one line of dialogue.
right, yeah.
He says, "Your future is what you make it."
So make
Now,
it a
that
good
if
one.
we've learned one thing
Right.
from these movies, that is
That
not
is
what
not.
time is.
Yeah, that is not at all what will happen. It infuriates me every time I see it. And then you have to have the final scene with needles.
I mean, I like that just because I'm like, okay, so they thought about it. and
Marty's grown.
it's weird how like they don't. Well, I mean, there's this kind of good and bad and ugly in terms of like how they. It's hilarious when about halfway through the movie, Marty suddenly remembers he left his life partner on a porch in the 80s in some kind of time
Hellscape.
vortex.
Yeah.
You know, and I feel like that's almost like the screenwriters going, "Shit, we forgot to talk about this."
Right.
But you know, this is at least a payoff as like, oh, you know, that's who Needles is, and that's why he's important.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's disappointing. It's very disappointing, and it makes me think, you know.
Well, especially
one of
after
biggest-
the whole I think the whole train sequence is fantastic.
great.
I mean, it's just great.
Yeah, it's pure irony. It's great.
Yeah,
you know,
everything
it's
about
like it's like we just got away from one train, and now a train's gonna hit the car.
Yeah, right.
And they do that really well, you know, with the drive-in movie picture of the Native Americans.
Yeah,
And then turn into real Native Americans. Right. I think that's like that kind of moment. It's like pure Spielberg movie magic.
Yeah, the shot of the DeLorean kind of coming over the hill filled with, you know, bushes and cacti, with the Native Americans bearing down on them. It's just, you know, it's fantastic.
But I mean, this is a thing we're going to talk about again when we do other trilogies. It's like, do part threes automatically revert to their originals?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it feels to me like if you look at this movie, you feel it's like an irresistible force of that these movies have to become what they were at the beginning.
Right. Well, you know what always interested me the most about Back to the Future 3, when you take all three movies in their entirety, the one lingering thought that I remember having walking out of the theater in 1990 was, how the fuck does Marty go back to high school on Monday?
Right.
You know, like, after everything he's experienced, how does he go back to school? I mean, you know, one problem being that he's 30 years old now in real life.
and it's 1990.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's yeah, it's also, you know, it shatters that nice little bubble that the movies have created, I think. Yeah, it's such a definitive statement to destroy the time machine in the way they did.
Right, yeah.
Then to sort of undo all that by having a
train show up,
steam-powered time machine come back. It's like,
that can fly.
Oh, well, so he would have got out of the past anyway. So this whole movie is pointless.
Yeah, it renders everything that happened for naught. And
yes.
And the lessons that they tried to just, you know, learn over the space of three movies, you know, it was like, well, fuck it.
And you know, this is like this is what they're working towards with the Clara Doc love story. And I think maybe if I'm being, you know, if I seem to be cruel about that, because I do like it as an idea.
Because Mary Steenburgen is fantastic. She is a national treasure, and you are being a dick.
I think I'm probably seeing it through this lens of like, this is where I know the story's heading, is to the time train, when I don't want that to happen.
I hear you.
So, you know, if like, I probably am just wishful thinking that none of this, you know, this subplot never happened, so we never had to be in this situation for it to happen. Yeah, and you know, there's thousands of ways they could have done it better. They could have brought his descendant, who could have been played by Christopher Lloyd,
right.
And then there's another gag there about everyone, you know, playing their own relatives.
Right. Yeah.
There's so many ways you could have done it.
There were many, many, many things, many different choices they could have made that didn't make you at the end of this movie go, oh, for fuck's sake.
Yeah, it's
But to me, it's like really the only misstep in the whole movie, and the second one has many missteps for me. And that's why I think this movie's better. I think this movie stands on its own. You know, we started this whole thing talking about accepting these movies as individual movies as opposed to looking at the originals or the sequels that precede it or follow it. And on its own, this movie tries to be something completely different than the other two movies, and I think it succeeds at that.
Yeah, I think it definitely succeeds in that aspect. I'll give you that. I don't have an issue with that. I just I think the biggest problem for me is that they want this. You're going to disagree with this, I can tell already, but I haven't even said anything.
Most likely.
In wanting this film to stand up as something other than a sequel for Back to the Future, they make it pale in comparison to other movies that do this kind of post-classical Hollywood Western revisionist thing. And that's why I'm bringing in movies like Once Upon a Time in the West and Blazing Saddles, is because like that's the entire project of those movies. With this one, it's just a kind of passing thing. And I think if it's going to justify itself as something different from the movie, it has to offer something that's competitive with those kind of visions of the West. And it doesn't really do that to me. There are hints of it. There are hints of it in the margin. You know, there's some kind of satire of the racism of the Old West and, you know, the anachronisms and things like that. But it's very plastic. And I think it's a shame that it was trying to compete on those terms rather than as a as a time travel movie, which I don't think it. Partly because there's not really much time travel in it.
Yeah.
Which, you know, they were into Rocky V. You know,
right.
Rocky V. There's no fights.
Just the street
this
brawl.
Is a little bit like, you know, once we get to the West, we're stuck there. I just think what they do there is not terribly
fun.
Interesting. I guess.
Fuck
I mean,
you.
I guess
it's
it.
Fun.
I guess it is doing something distinctly different from what the previous movies did.
It absolutely is. They have all kinds of. I just like the little jokes. Just the tiniest jokes in this movie make me laugh. Like, do you have a back door in this place? Yeah, it's in the back.
In the back, yeah. Well, yeah. There's a. Yeah, there's the incidental characters are great, but yeah, there's something this time around. It just didn't do it for me.
All right, well, I'm gonna have
I guess I appreciated the second movie on an intellectual level the way I've never before, and this one, while I was settled down, I was ready to kind of enjoy it as a cozy, you know, Sunday afternoon, a bit of escapism. And for what is ostensibly an adventure movie, I found it very boring.
Oh, not me.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
And I used to be excited by this movie, and I'm sure I will be again. But it's just
I'm gonna call on you in a couple of weeks. I'm gonna ask you if you've watched it again, and we'll see.
Oh no, I feel like I'm gonna regret everything.
That you've said because it's so wrong. I understand.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's it for Back to the Future 3. Let's move on to pitch a sequel. It's time to pitch a sequel. Tom, do you have a sequel in mind?
I do.
All right.
The sequel is called Back for the Future.
You and your numbers.
And the 2 has become a 4.
Oh,
Not that the original 2 was a 2, but yeah, I'm switching things.
Would be if it was up to you. Let's be honest.
Yeah. The two is a 4, so we pick up in the time-honored tradition of these movies exactly where the last movie ended, with the time train hurtling awkwardly through space and time. And you know, we at the beginning of the film, we're just accepting the fact that this thing cannot travel through time and space. Okay? it's just gonna break. So it breaks, smashes,
Breaks down, kills everybody. Roll
Yeah.
credits.
Well, we do an Aliens 3, and Clara, Jules, and Vern, they're gone. They're done. Eaten by the time travel alien. Gone.
Very
And
good then.
Doc Brown, Doc Brown is in the only surviving cabin of the train, and
Of course.
when he wakes up, he's back. November 2nd, November 12th, 1955.
Yeah, November 12th.
November 12th, 1955. He automatically resets to that point. And that's when he's sort of like, I'm going to resolve one of the remaining plot threads of this franchise, which is November 12th, 1955 the center of time and space, or is it just a huge coincidence?
Fantastic.
So, yeah, that's the basis of the movie.
Is Marty in it?
Marty's not in it.
Okay.
So Doc Brown finally gets his vehicle because there's no one else in the movie but him.
Right.
It's just him wandering around November 12th, 1955.
Does he see his old self?
Yeah, it's sort of like, it's just him conducting an experiment into whether this is the nexus of time and space.
All right.
So it would actually, I'm looking to market it as more of an educational film. Maybe show it in schools.
What grade?
Weapons grade plutonium.
Perfect. Well, I myself went in a little bit of a different direction.
No.
You and I were talking. When I first thought about this idea of pitching a sequel, this is one series where I thought, no, fuck you. I'm just not doing it. I refuse. These are just, it's a just great, perfect, not perfect, but you know what I mean. It's like it just wraps up fine for me as it is.
Yeah.
The trilogy, that story's done. And
Yes.
there's nothing more kind of annoying than a trilogy that wraps everything up and then a fourth movie appears. But if I have to pitch a sequel, and the other thing that's interesting to me about pitching a sequel is, for a lot of these movies, this movie was made Back to the Future 3 was made in 1990. So, you have to suppose, are you making this movie in 1991 or so I decided that I would suppose that this movie is being made in around the year 2015. So the actors are much older because they have this stupid time travel train that appears at the end of this movie. I decided that Clara is sick, and Doc brings her and the kids back to try and save her. I was trying to think of a good reason that Doc would use time travel again, and this made the most sense to me. Meanwhile,
but isn't he fine with time travel now? Isn't that another way in which the ending completely usurps the meaning of the film?
the whole series? Yes, he does appear to be fine with it, as he went ahead and built a goddamn train. Meanwhile, we know that the actor Michael J. Fox has his own health issues, so I thought that could come into play. And Doc decides
he's now a mouse.
No, but he's got the Parkinson's.
No, I know, but I'm the way that they've covered that in the past is by making him a cartoon mouse.
That's true.
So I thought maybe you were gonna make him a mouse.
I was not gonna make him a mouse. Think more like Rescue Me. Except he's
The Rescuers.
Well, he was on that show, and he was a total dick on that show. But imagine him not quite a dick. So what I imagined for Marty was that he was becoming successful as a musical artist, and then turned to producing because of his condition. And then Doc decides, well, I'm going to go ahead and save my wife with modern medicine. Maybe I could go into the future and help Marty and get him back to his true love. Meanwhile, Biff has been able to put together what happened to him in 1955, and he decides to seek his revenge over the next 30 to 60 years in order to really stick it to Marty and the Doc. And so Biff will reappear. Maybe there'll be some espionage. Maybe he'll make his own time machine, that kind of thing.
I want to see that scene with Thomas F. Wilson and like Usual Suspects Kaiser Soze moment where he has all the information on a board and he's just piecing it all together as he looks around. He's just like, it just goes like DeLorean,
Yeah.
sexy almanac, and he just floats by it.
He's drinking a cup of coffee out of an almanac mug.
That's right. And it's like the name of Marty McFly's Japanese boss in the future.
Oh yeah, I don't remember
What
his
was
name.
his name?
I don't remember.
We didn't talk about. I just want. I don't want to interrupt your pitch.
Oh, the
It's
pitch
going
is
great.
done. I want everybody
I
to
actually
know.
see it more as a Bill and Ted, but
yeah.
okay.
I don't have a lot of heart put into this sequel idea,
But we didn't talk about the racism of these movies.
oh yeah.
There's his Japanese boss from the future. There's when Marty returns to 1985 and an African American father shouting "Freeze, sucker!"
Yeah.
Bad.
Not good.
Bad stuff. But anyway,
And just the
wanna throw
idea
that
of
in.
like, it's now a terrible neighborhood, so because of course black people live there, so that's why.
That's exactly.
I mean, it's just
yeah.
oh fucking man, the 80s and the 90s apparently, 1990 as well. Oh god.
And apparently everything up until this very year.
Right. So it'll be fascinating to see how movies change. God damn it, I hope for the better. All right, ladies and gentlemen, on that sour note, that does it for the Back to the Future series. Please let us know, how do you rank these two movies? Which do you like better? Find the Everything Sequel podcast on Facebook. Find us on Instagram. Find us on Twitter. Let us know what you think. That's it for the Back to the Future series. For Tom Stewart, my name is Michael Shantz. Tom, say goodbye.
Another goodbye.
Very good then. We'll see you next time. We'll be talking about another couple of sequels. Stay tuned.